Usually, when I returned to Mikisweni, I did so with a sense of ease and completion, but not this time. After passing my exams and returning home, I told the regent what had transpired. He was furious and could not comprehend the reasons for my actions. He thought it utterly senseless. Without even hearing my full explanation, he bluntly informed me that I would obey the principal's instructions and return to Fort Hare in the autumn. His tone invited no discussion. It would have been pointless as well as disrespectful for me to argue with my benefactor. I resolved to let the matter rest a while. Justice had also returned to Mikisweni and we were mightily glad to see one another. No matter how long Justice and I were apart, the brotherly bonds that united us were instantly renewed. Justice had left school the year before and was living in Cape Town. Within a few days, I resumed my old life at home. I looked after matters for the regent, including his herd and his relations with other chiefs. I did not dwell on the situation at Fort Hare, but life has a way of forcing decisions on those who vacillate. It was an entirely different matter, unrelated to my studies, that forced my hand. A few weeks after my homecoming, the regent summoned Justice and me to a meeting. "My children," he said in a very somber tone, "I fear that I am not much longer for this world, and before I journey to the land of the ancestors, it is my duty to see my two sons properly married. I have accordingly arranged unions for both of you." This announcement took us both by surprise, and Justice and I looked at each other with a mixture of shock and helplessness. The two girls came from very good families, the regent said. Justice was to marry the daughter of Khalifa, a prominent Thembu nobleman, and Ruhilla, as the regent always called me, was to marry the daughter of the local Thembu priest. The marriages, he said, were to take place immediately. Lobola, the bride price or dowry, is normally paid in the form of cattle by the groom's father and would be paid by the community in Justice's case, and in my own by the regent himself. Justice and I said little. It was not our place to question the regent, and as far as he was concerned, the matter was settled. The regent brooked no discussion. The bride had already been selected and Labola paid. It was final. Justice and I walked out of our interview with our heads down, dazed and dejected. The regent was acting in accordance with Thembu law and custom, and his own motives could not be impugned. He wanted us to be settled during his lifetime. We had always known that the regent had the right to arrange marriages for us, but now it was no longer an abstract possibility. The brides were not fantasies, but flesh and blood women whom we actually knew. With all due respect to the young woman's family, I would be dishonest if I said that the girl the regent had selected for me was my dream bride. Her family was prominent and respected, and she was attractive in a rather dignified way. But this young lady, I am afraid, had long been in love with Justice. The regent would not have known this, as parents rarely know the romantic side of their children's life. My intended partner was undoubtedly no more eager to be burdened with me than I was with her. At that time, I was more advanced socially than politically. While I would not have considered fighting the political system of the white man, I was quite prepared to rebel against the social system of my own people. Ironically, it was the regent himself who was indirectly to blame for this, for it was the education he had afforded me that had caused me to reject such traditional customs. I had attended college and university with women for years and had a small handful of love affairs. I was a romantic, and I was not prepared to have anyone, even the regent, select a bride for me. I made an appointment with the queen, the regent's wife, and put my case to her. I could not tell her that I did not want the regent to arrange a bride for me under any circumstances, as she would naturally have been unsympathetic. Instead, I devised an alternative plan and told her that I preferred to marry a girl who was a relative of the queen's, whom I found desirable as a prospective partner. This young lady was in fact very attractive, but I had no idea as to what she thought of me. I said I would marry her as soon as I completed my studies. This was half a ruse, but it was a better option than the regent's plan. The Queen looked my side in the matter, but the regent could not be dissuaded. He had made his decision and he was not going to alter it. I felt as though he had left me no choice. I could not go through with this marriage, which I considered unfair and ill advised. At the same time, I believed that I could no longer remain under the regent's guidance if I rejected his plan for me. Justice agreed, and the two of us decided that the only choice remaining was to run away. And the only place to run to was Johannesburg. In retrospect, I realized that we did not exhaust all the options available to us. I could have attempted to discuss the matter with the regent through intermediaries and perhaps come to some settlement within the framework of our tribe and family. I could have appealed to the regent's cousin, Chief Zilingdobo, one of the most enlightened and influential chiefs at the court of Mikisweni, but I was young and impatient and did not see any virtue in waiting. Escape seemed the only course. We kept our plot secret while we worked out its details. First, we needed an opportunity. The regent believed Justice and I brought out the worst in each other, or at least Justice's penchant for adventures and hijinks influenced my more conservative disposition. As a result, he took pains to keep us separate as much as possible. When the regent was traveling, he generally asked one of us to accompany him so that we would not be alone together in his absence. More often than not, he took Justice with him, as he liked me to remain in Mikisweni to look after his affairs. But we learned that the regent was preparing to leave for a full week to attend a session of the Bunga, the Transkean Legislative Assembly, without either of us, and we decided this was the ideal time to steal away. We resolved that we would depart for Johannesburg shortly after the regent left for the Bunga. I had few clothes, and we managed to fit whatever we had into a single suitcase. The regent left early on Monday, and by late morning we were ready to go. But just as we were preparing to leave, he unexpectedly returned. We saw his car drive in and we ran into the garden and hid among the mealy stalks. The regent came into the house and his first question was, "Where are those boys?" Someone replied, "Oh, they are around." But the regent was suspicious and was not content with that reply. He had returned, he said, because he had forgotten to take his Epsom salts. He looked around a bit and then seemed satisfied. I realized that he must have had some kind of premonition because he could easily buy Epsom salts in town. When his car disappeared behind the hills, we were on our way. We had almost no money between us, but that morning we went to see a local trader and made a deal to sell him 2 of the regent's prize oxen. The trader assumed that we were selling the animals at the regent's behest, and we did not correct him. He paid us a very good price, and with that money we hired a car to take us to the local station where we would catch a train to Johannesburg. All seemed to be going smoothly, but unbeknown to us, the regent had driven to the station and instructed the manager that if 2 boys fitting a description came to buy tickets for Johannesburg, the manager must turn them away because they were not to leave the Transkei. We arrived at the station only to find that the manager would not sell us tickets. We asked him why, and he said, "Your father has been here and says you are trying to run away." We were stunned by this and dashed back to our hired car and told the driver to go to the next station. It was nearly 50 miles away, and it took us more than an hour to get there. We managed to get a train, but it went only as far as Queenstown. In the 1940s, traveling for an African was a complicated process. All Africans over the age of 16 were compelled to carry native passes issued by the Native Affairs Department and were required to show that pass to any white policeman, civil servant or employer. Failure to do so could mean arrest, trial, a jail sentence or fine. The pass stated where the bearer lived, who his chief was, and whether he had paid the annual poll tax, which was a tax levied only on Africans. Later, the pass took the form of a booklet or reference book, and it was known containing detailed information that had to be signed by one's employer every month. Justice and I had our passes in order. But for an African to leave his magisterial district and enter that of another for the purpose of working or living, he needed travel documents, a permit, and a letter from his employer, or in our case, his guardian. None of which we had. Even at the best of times, when one had all these documents, a police officer might harass you because one of them was missing a signature or had an incorrect date. Not having any was extremely risky. Our plan was to disembark in Queenstown, make our way to the house of a relative, and then arrange the necessary documents. This was also an ill-considered plan, but we came in for a bit of luck because at the house in Queenstown, we accidentally met Chief Mepindombini, a brother of the regent, who was fond of justice and myself. Chief Mepindombini greeted us warmly, and we explained that we needed the requisite travel documents from the local magistrate. We lied about why we required them, claiming that we were on an errand for the regent. Chief Mepindombini was a retired interpreter from the Native Affairs Department and knew the chief magistrate well. He had no reason to doubt our story and not only escorted us to the magistrate but vouched for us and explained our predicament. After listening to the chief, the magistrate rapidly made out the necessary travel documents and affixed the official stamp. Justice and I looked at each other and smiled in complicity. But just as the magistrate was handing over the documents to us, he recalled something and said that, as a matter of courtesy, he ought to inform the chief magistrate of Umtata, in whose jurisdiction we fell. This made us uneasy, but we stayed seated in his office. The magistrate used his telephone to reach his colleague in Umtata. As luck would have it, the regent was just then playing a call on the chief magistrate of Umtata and was in his very office. As our magistrate was explaining our situation to the chief magistrate of Umtata, the latter gentleman said something like, "Oh, their father just happens to be right here," and then put the regent on the line. When the magistrate informed the regent what we were requesting, the regent exploded. "Arrest those boys," he shouted, loud enough for us to hear his voice through the receiver. "Arrest them and bring them back here immediately." The chief magistrate put down the phone. He regarded us angrily. "You boys are thieves and liars," he told us. "You have presumed upon my good offices and then deceived me. Now I am going to have you arrested." I immediately rose to our defense. From my studies at Fort Hare, I had a little knowledge of law and I put it to use. I said that we had told him lies, that was true, but we had committed no offense and violated no laws, and we could not be arrested simply on the recommendation of a chief, even if he happened to be our father. The magistrate backed down and did not arrest us, but told us to leave his office and never to darken his door again. Chief Mepindombini was also annoyed and left us to our own devices. Justice remembered that he had a friend in Queenstown named Sydney Nu, who was working in the office of a white attorney. We went to see this man and explained our situation. He told us that the mother of the attorney he worked for was driving into Johannesburg and he would see if she would offer us a lift. He told us that his mother would give us a ride if we paid a fee of £15 sterling. This was a vast sum, for more than the cost of a train ticket. The fee virtually depleted our savings, but we had no choice. We decided to risk getting our passes stamped and to obtain the correct travel documents once we were in Johannesburg. We left early the following morning. In those days, it was customary for blacks to ride in the back seat of the car if a white was driving. The two of us sat in that fashion, with Justice directly behind the woman. Justice was a friendly, exuberant person and immediately began chatting to me. This made the old woman extremely uncomfortable. She had obviously never been in the company of a black who had no inhibitions about whites. After only a few miles, she told Justice that she wanted him to switch seats with me so that she could keep an eye on him and for the rest of the journey, she watched him like a hawk. But after a while, Justice's charm worked on her, and she would occasionally laugh at something he said. At about 10 o'clock that evening, we saw before us, glinting in the distance, a maze of lights that seemed to stretch in all directions. Electricity, to me, had always been a novelty and a luxury, and there was a vast landscape of electricity, a city of light. I was terribly excited to see the city I had been hearing about since I was a child. Johannesburg had always been depicted as a city of dreams, a place where one could transform oneself from a poor peasant into a wealthy sophisticate, a city of danger and of opportunity. I remember the stories that Banakabe had told us at circumcision school, of buildings so tall you could not see the tops, of crowds of people speaking languages you had never heard of sleek motor cars and beautiful women and dashing gangsters. It was Egoli, the city of gold, where I would soon be making my home. On the outskirts of the city, the traffic became denser. I had never seen so many cars on the road at one time. Even in Umtata, there were never more than a handful of cars, and here there were thousands. We drove around the city rather than through it, but I could see the silhouette of the tall blocks of buildings, even darker against the dark night sky. We drove around the city rather than through it. I looked at great billboards by the side of the road advertising secrets and candy and beer. It all seemed tremendously glamorous. Soon we were in an area of stately mansions, even the smallest of which was bigger than the regent's palace, with grand front lawns and tall iron gates. This was the suburb where the old lady's daughter lived, and we pulled into the long driveway of one of these beautiful homes. Justice and I were dispatched to the servants' wing, where we were to spend the night. We thanked the old lady and then crawled off to sleep on the floor. But the prospect of Johannesburg was so exciting to me that I felt as though I slept on a beautiful feather bed that night. The possibilities seemed infinite. I had reached the end of what seemed like a long journey, but it was actually the very beginning of a much longer and more trying journey that would test me in ways that I could not then have imagined.